Hey runners, I'm Holly from The Run Experience. Today I am giving you a beginner runner's guide to mobility and stretching. You hear it all the time from everybody that you're supposed to be stretching before and after you work out. Even if you're not, you're supposed to be stretching every day because it's just really good for you, but maybe you don't understand anything else beyond that. So I am going to give you the full rundown of this as well as my favorite exercises head to toe to get started. Let's jump in. So I want to take a very simple top-down approach to all of this, make it very understandable for you, and clear up some of the misconceptions or thrown around terms that you've heard around this. So first off, stretching, flexibility, and mobility tend to be used as the same thing. You know, you'll hear people talk and use these terms around preparing for your training and then cooling down afterwards. But I want to talk about what each of those means. So when we talk about stretching, stretching is simply lengthening muscle tone. So just those muscle fibers, increasing the stretch there. That is what we're doing when we're stretching. Flexibility is basically the degree to which you can stretch and how comfortable you are at those end ranges. Someone with more flexibility, when you hear people say that, they tend to be able to bend a lot. They have lots of range of motion in that muscle tone. They can get further in that stretch. Those people are more flexible. Lastly, mobility. Mobility we are referring to as how freely a joint can move, how much range of motion you have in that joint. We can be talking about our hips, our ankles, our shoulders, basically how much range of motion do we have there, how easily can we find those end ranges and move well. So in the next section, we are going to talk about how all of that relates to your training and why it's so important to have a routine to increase these things. So we're talking about all of this because I want you guys to be running and training correctly, and I don't want you to get injured. So that is the main purpose of this entire video. When we stretch and we prepare our bodies for those training sessions, we allow ourselves to find fuller ranges of motion for our body to work in, rather than just going into something with our tight areas staying tight. An example would be if you're someone who runs or walks with your feet turned out, there's a good chance that the outsides of your hips are tight. Maybe that's from a lot of sitting or a lot of driving or whatever that is. And what happens is if you don't work into those hips and loosen them up a little bit to maybe get those feet aligned before you start running, you're gonna do your whole run or your whole training session with your feet turned out. That's a small example of so many other things that can go on. But we want to undo these things to give yourself a better shot at running well, which will lead to more efficient running and less injury. Lastly, when we prep our bodies and we also cool down properly, we're letting ourselves find those full ranges of motion in all of our muscle fibers and our joints, which will keep us prepared for our training. So rather than just taking off on that first sprint and seeing if the hamstrings are ready to deal then, you've already done some dynamic stretching, so you're gonna be able to find those fuller ranges and have that body protected first. Dynamic versus static stretching, just a simple overview of that. Dynamic stretching is going to be where you're moving through a few different ranges of motion to get that stretch. So maybe I'm hitting a full hamstring stretch, but I'm going back down into a lunge and I'm working between those two movements to keep everything flowing, and I'm not holding a static stretch, which would be just staying at one end range of motion for, you know, a few breaths or something like that where you're just holding still. I like to save static stretching for after a training session and use dynamic in a warm-up. In the next section, we are going to go head to toe, my favorite exercises. So we are going to work head to toe. I've got 4 areas. We're going to use a lacrosse ball to work on some mobility, so range of motion there, and then we're going to follow it up with a dynamic or static stretch. So first area we're going to hit is the neck and shoulders and that upper back. And we're doing this because when you run, that arm swing is very important. You've seen us talk about it in other videos. To get that full, good range of motion with those elbows driving back, you want to be nice and loose up through the neck and shoulders. Plus, if you are just hunched over your keyboard all week, this is just going to feel good to undo that. So grab your lacrosse ball or something of similar size, and I'm going to start by laying on my back here. And I am going to start by putting this basically right under the trapezius, so right under that thick part of muscle here on the neck. So I'm going to lay back, and I'm going to place that there, knowing that I can control how much weight I put down on that ball. For me, I'm going to lay that head back, and I'm going to start by just working forward and back with a straight arm here. If this is too much to lay your head back, just cradle your head in your hand here working forward and back. We'll go about 10 reps like that. Just working through those crunchy spots. And then I'm gonna take this into a snow angel. So, as if you're out there in the snow, you're just gonna go wide, big movements here. I am not gonna lie to you, this isn't the most feel-good activity, but you're gonna really, really notice some change after that. So you're gonna work through here. Say you've done about 10 of each of those, take that out, and then just try a couple without it, and I already notice a much bigger range of motion there. I will probably move to one other spot lower on the back, but still staying in that top region there on around the shoulder blade, and you can work through the same thing. You're gonna follow this one up with a little arm circle and arm kind of, I call it the Michael Phelps. Let's see what I'm talking about here. So you can do this standing. I'm just gonna have my palms forward. I'm just gonna start with some small arm circles here, keeping my core on tight. Just getting some blood flow now that we've worked on that mobility range of motion. We're gonna go a little bigger here, just like this. And then we're gonna reverse. So same thing, keep that butt squeezed, starting small, a little bigger, and then a little bigger. And then the last one here, this is that Michael Phelps one. You're gonna just lean over. Again, this might be a little bit better standing, but I'm just gonna show you here. Hips back, and you're just gonna open and close, crossing over each arm in front, hugging yourself in between. Again, guys, that lucky number is probably 10 for everything. Breathe through this. That is gonna hit your neck, shoulders, upper back, and shoulder blades. And the next one, we're gonna get into those hips. All right, so getting into those hips, this is the one I was talking about. If you're someone who turns your feet out, this is a great way to kind of get those feet back in alignment, get those knees a little bit more protected with that greater range of motion. You are going to grab your lacrosse ball or whatever you've got, and we're gonna just sit on your side for a second here. Just have a mat or something soft under you. And I'm just gonna find basically right where it feels tight. Just go by feel on this one. For me, it's pretty much right below where I can feel my hip bone here. And I'm just gonna put my weight on here, but knowing I have my arm to support, if it's too much pressure, I can always, take some off that way. And all I'm gonna do is just first breathe into this. So just kind of big inhales and exhales, seeing where I'm at, seeing how tight it is there. And now what I'm gonna do is use my lower leg on the ground to find a little bit of movement here to work around the tight spot. So what I'll actually do is just bend and straighten this lower leg. And then maybe I'll find a little rolling here side to side. Again, you're using that hard object to kind of pinpoint one area and then do some soft tissue work around it. So kind of opening up that spot. After I do that, and of course you'll do the other side as well, we're gonna go into a dynamic stretch here for the hips and get some bigger range of motion there. So I'm gonna kick my front leg out here, that left leg, finding a lunge. Don't worry about how low you are here. You can just hold on to whatever's comfortable. I'll usually hold my foot, but if you wanna go a little higher and grab your shin, that's fine. And we're gonna go for some big hip circles. So you wanna create a big circle going forward and out and around, drawing huge circles almost with the knee there. About 10 one direction, 10 the other, trying to go bigger each time. Getting into the knee and hip, and then you're gonna reverse. So going just like that. Also being able to use this back hip, opening up the front of the hip flexor. We didn't have the ball in there today, but trying to drop it down to the ground a little bit lower will increase that stretch. Again, the dynamic aspect of this is making it a little easier to breathe through than if you were just holding tight. Last one for the hips we'll do is you're gonna go to a squat stance. If you can't see me all the way, that's okay. So just a little bit wider than hips width. And I'm just gonna have you guys drop down to the bottom of a squat and then use your hands however you need to support yourself down here and move around. Just slight movement. Try to keep those toes straight ahead, but you're pressing the knees out. And you'll just hang out here for about 20 to 30 seconds, pressing those knees out with your elbows if you want, keeping that chest up tall. And just when you get to those little grindy areas, trying to hang out there, breathe through it, and create some more stretch. Next one we're gonna get into is the hamstrings. So those hamstrings, I don't even really need to go into why, but of course hamstrings are so important to your running and everything you do in general. They are huge muscle groups back there, and when they are tight, you know it, and it leads to so many different injuries. So we're gonna get into those hamstrings. Just a reminder that when you do run properly, and I've done a few videos on beginner running techniques, so check those out if you haven't. You know, the idea here is that you keep the hips forward and use the glutes and hamstrings so that you can create a pulling motion when you run. So we really need to make sure that those hamstrings are primed to do so. Grab your lacrosse ball, or if you have something even a little bit bigger, or even a coffee mug or something, those are bigger muscles, you can use something larger as your tool. I'm gonna hop up here because you will want a raised surface for this one so that you're able to move that leg around. When you're on the ground, you don't have that range of motion. So find something like a bench, raise something like this, or even just a chair at home with a nice hard surface. So make sure that you're not on your bed, that's gonna be a little too soft. Put your tool right under, let's start with the middle of the hamstring, so just right in that first tight spot. And all I'm gonna do is just use some pressure and then flex and extend this leg. Really simple here. You can even do this kind of quick like I'm doing because you're just kind of feeling around for where those tight areas are. From here, I can work a little bit side to side, kind of swinging around. The nice part about it being a ball on a hard surface is it rolls with you. After I've spent some time there, I might move a little closer to the knee and maybe increase that pressure, kind of feeling around little circles. So many different things you can do here. I would spend about 2 to 3 minutes on each leg using that tool. Next thing we're gonna do is jump into our dynamic stretch, of course. So I'm gonna hope that stays. You're gonna find a nice wide leg position on this one, and actually turn this way, wider than your squat stance. And you're gonna grab your legs, with whichever range of motion you have here. So you can start at the knees and work your way down. And you're just gonna find some bending and straightening. I'll make sure you guys can see. Bending low, straightening back. Of course, if you don't have super flexible hamstrings yet, that's fine. Just go to your end range, whatever that is. So if that's just a couple inches up and down, no problem. Breathing through here. Dropping that head and neck. You don't want to get all that tensed up after you already worked on that. Go through about 15 times or so. The other option here would be to go one leg at a time, so kind of splitting those legs up. And again, just working through front and back. You'll feel this one quick, so just go by feel on there on each leg. Lastly, we're gonna finish with the lower leg. So we've saved the best for last. We're gonna work into those lower legs, the ankles, the calves, really what are taking so much of that work when you go running or when you do any type of training. So we're gonna use that lacrosse ball again. You're gonna start with it right under the meat of the calf. And what I'm gonna do is drape that other leg over to add a little bit of extra weight. And all I'm gonna do is find some circles through the ankle here. So we're kind of getting 2 birds hit with 1 stone here. We're gonna circle and find that range of motion in the ankle while working into some mobility work for the calf. So finding those tight spots, and again, trying to manipulate the tissue to get you a little greater range of motion through the back of the leg there. We'll go, 10 to 20 circles one direction and the other there. You can also do some just flexing and pointing. We'll of course go to the other leg for that. And I want you to make sure that just like the hamstrings, you're hitting different areas of the calf. So maybe I'll do a couple of my circles down closer to the ankle, and then I'll move it up to do a few more in that way closer to the knee. You wanna get all of that nice and ready to go. We'll follow this one up with actually a static stretch. So you'll lose part of me here, but you're just gonna see my lower leg. I'm gonna find a step or something I can lean up against or hang off. And all I'm gonna do is kind of find my end range for that calf stretch. So I am just gonna take a static one here, which means just holding for breathing. So I'm not gonna move at all. I'm just gonna keep that stretch staying where it is. And on my exhales, just trying to release more and more into that stretch there. Probably spending about 10 deep breaths on each side. What I can then do from here is actually bend my knee, sit my hips back a little bit, and I can actually get more of a stretch through the Achilles tendon. So a bent leg off that surface would give you the Achilles stretch, and a straight would be more through the meat of the calf. Same thing on the other side. The last thing you can do is a little downward dog kind of dynamic stretch. So kind of finding that tripod position here, hips up to the air. And what I'll do is just kind of pedal through my feet, just going up and down. You'll get into those ankles as well as through the calves. This is a great one before you run. Just make sure you're breathing if you're inverted. You don't want to have that blood rush when you stand up. Going through about maybe 20 back and forth there. And that will do it for the lower leg. Guys, those types of exercises are just as important as the training itself. They could be the difference between pulling your hamstring or not, being out of training for 5 weeks or not. Remember how important it is to prep your body properly and cool down after you train. Those things are so important, and I hope this video helped you learn a little bit more about the difference between stretching, flexibility, mobility work, and that you can pull from those exercises and movements with just that one tool and get your body in the best shape it's been in for your training. I hope you noticed some change there. Thanks again for going through that with me. Guys, thanks for listening into that video. If you're looking to start a training plan or maybe learn a little bit more about what we do at the Run Experience, you should click down in the description. We've got a 2-week free quick start program. That's 2 weeks of workouts, running, strength, and mobility all in there for you. Just enter your name and email and we'll send those over. If you liked this video, make sure you hit that like button down below. And in the comments, drop any questions you have around this topic today or requests for future videos, because I am always checking out those comments and listening to you guys. Lastly, subscribe to the channel. You know that we have brand new videos coming out each and every week around all different topics, and we want you to catch those. So hit that subscribe button. I will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.